So will Ukraine have the weapons it needs for the battle in the Donbass region? Former CIA director, retired four-star General David Petraeus is here to discuss. General, thank you so much for joining us. John Kirby just gave a fascinating press conference about an hour ago. He's always a straight shooter. And he repeated a couple of times that Russia is, quote, shaping. And I found that to be, for most folks who don't understand what this means and the magnitude of what's going to happen, can you explain that to us?
Well, really, it just comes down to preparing, Charles, and good to be with you. This could be a pivotal moment in the war in Ukraine, as the Russians obviously gave up on the effort to seize Kyiv, topple the government, and replace President Zelensky with a pro-Russian figure. They lost the battles of Kyiv, of Chernihiv, and of Sumy in the north, and the Ukrainians won. So the Russians have refocused in the area where they have made some gains, very hard fought. And they're going to reinforce that in the east and the southeast, and then presumably further down around the port of Mariupol when those defenders, incredibly resolute, really the Alamo of Ukraine in many respects, when that ultimately falls. And his discussion of shaping, normally for us, that would also include preparatory fires. It would include a variety of positioning of logistical assets, medical evacuation, resupply, ammunition caches, refueling assets, and so forth. And they're doing quite a bit of that, but they have struggled, as Admiral Kirby noted, and I know him well from the war years in the past. They have struggled with the logistical aspects of this. As he rightly noted, they've struggled with so much else, including air ground, including combined arms effects, where you use not just tanks, but infantry, engineers, artillery, mortars, and so forth all together, protected by air defense. All of these have been very, very challenging for them, and surprisingly so, given the months that they supposedly spent on training and maneuvers in Russia and also in Belarus before taking the operations to invade the country.
General, I was also surprised to hear about Russia's capabilities, that although they have suffered losses, and we've noted them, everyone has been shocked at the magnitude of these losses, that they still, quote, have quite a bit left, a lot of combat power. In fact, the vast majority. It sounds really ominous in my mind that strategically and certainly the way they carried out the plan so far it's been a series of blunders, but they still are capable of maybe significant damage.
Well, we think that's the case, but we will have to see. The one challenge of the East that was not present in the North is that the terrain is a good bit more open. I've been to that part of Ukraine pre-COVID, certainly, when I visited the front lines in the Donbass. It is much more advantageous terrain to the kinds of offensive operations that we presume that the Russians will want to conduct. Again, armor, infantry, fighting vehicles, and so forth. The question is whether or not they're going to be able to go off-road onto the fields, or whether they will still be muddy, as they reportedly are right now. And in that case, even the track vehicles will get mired in those fields. And that would be very, very helpful for Ukraine, which has to stop these forces in order to then hit them with these sophisticated shoulder-launched anti-tank guided missiles, the Javelins, take out their aircraft with the Stingers, employ a variety of the other systems. And I'm very, frankly, enthusiastic about the addition of 700 of the so-called Switchblade drones to the list that's being provided. These could be game changers, because when the soldiers get out of their vehicles, these are loitering munitions. They're launched by Ukrainian forces out of a tube. They're quite intuitive to use. There's an iPad-like device that the operator looks at. He picks the target. It's circling above. It's electric, so you can't hear it. And then it just takes out that target. So it is literally silent but deadly. What we're sending are the anti-personnel versions. I'd love to see a lot of the armor version, but they're literally just not in our arsenal. And let me just highlight something that is a challenge for us. I think we'd like to provide a great deal more for Ukraine. The challenge is that we do not have the ammunition that they need. It is Eastern Bloc ammunition. Their artillery shoots 152 millimeter howitzer ammunition. We shoot 155. That's why we're providing the howitzers, and then also tens of thousands of rounds to go with it, because their artillery won't go into it. Same with tanks, same with fighting vehicles. So anything that we provide that would require a lot of spare parts, a lot of different ammunition, and so forth, will be challenging for them. And that's been an issue here. Same with planes. I mean, we can't give them F-16s and we don't have MiG-29s. Now, what we are doing, and they're working very hard, is to get the Eastern European countries that have this equipment, have this ammunition, have those planes, to transfer them to the Ukrainians, which they can use right away because they're very similar. But the Western European and U.S. Arsenals just don't have those items in them.
So General, yeah, we're 40,000 rounds for the 155 howitzers and some training to train their trainers. The planes, it sounds like you're suggesting then that the MiG-29s are still possibly in play?
Well, I don't know. I'm not part of that discussion. I wish that they could have just been quietly handed to the Ukrainian pilots at some airfield in eastern Poland, and no one would make a lot of big deal about it. Unfortunately, they did. Then they wanted to, in essence, launder it through the U.S. and get a guarantee that we'd provide F-16s, which we can't. All the ones coming off the assembly line are committed to another nation in the Indo-Pacific, which, after all, is still the priority, despite what is going on here and the way that we're focused very, very much on that.
I've got a minute to go, General. So a Ukrainian official says that this is now the active phase of the offensive. Of course, a lot of experts thought this would be a 1 week, maybe several day, invasion, quick victory. And this is a lot of folks in the West. Do we have a potential timeline right now, a new timeline?
I don't think so. I think the timeline is in Moscow. It's Putin's watch or clock. And he's watching his economy, his financial system, his business community, and his inner circle be damaged very, very severely. And the question is, how long is he going to allow this to go on? And he's watching as 300,000 of his most talented Russian citizens have left the country rather than stay in a country that truly is now the personification of the evil empire, and he is a global pariah. Yeah. That's the challenge, and it is a contest of wills between him and certainly President Zelensky in Ukraine, whose forces have far exceeded certainly what the Russians thought they would do. You said that they thought this would be a few days or a week. That was what Russia thought it would be, and this has been a very, very rude awakening for them about the limitations of their forces and the extraordinary capabilities demonstrated by the Ukrainians.
Great point, General Petraeus. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.